need to think of sexual consent.
Yes, and the judge will decide your fate. In jail. You will have time to think about it in jail.
Yes, guys.
Don't do it.
Welcome to African Teapot Podcast. My name is Exy.
And my name is Lini. Join us as we journey through Africa's vast variety of culture and heritage.
We explore issues most African families face, both home and abroad. Make sure to like, share, and follow this podcast. Join the conversation on social media and let your voice be heard. Before you continue into the rest of the episode, this is a disclaimer to our listeners and Tipotians out there. This episode contains sexual language or conversations around sex. So please keep that in mind before you continue to the rest of the episode. Thank you for listening, guys. Hello, guys, and welcome to another episode on African Teapot. Of course, it's me, Exy.
And it's Lini.
And today is a special episode because it's our anniversary episode. We are 3 years older. Yay! And today we also have, for the first time, a live audience with us. Making us a little special.
We're always special.
Yeah, but today extra special.
Well, I'm special.
I am too. We are special. Anyways, thank you guys for being here. Amazing people, amazing supporters, and good food that came from our collaborator, right? Kitchen Creations.
Hi, guys.
Yeah,
it's
check her out on Instagram. Check her out on Instagram. She did amazing. We're going to post the videos and the pictures. And to get into our topic, today's topic is sex consent.
But you can't forget the sponsors, my dear.
Yeah, today's topic is sex consent. Just getting to that. So we're going to get into the breakdown of how that's going to work. And before we get into the sweet, juicy stuff, just to do a shout out to Kalu James and Sandrine Mefor for supporting and being sponsors to today's get together, guys. So yeah, financially they were like, yeah, let's see how we can spruce this and make it special, right? So keeping all the food and drinks in mind, we're going to go into the nitty gritty of what today is.
But here's how it's going to work. So Exy and myself are going to go through the boring information and the stuff which you already know or might not know. And then at the interludes, the audience are going to chime in with questions and comments and all the stuff they have saved up for us. But we're going to be covering sex consent. My fellow Africans, sex consent only. Get tested. Lyrics, we're not talking about any STDs today. Sex consent only. There'll be a couple of voices. And I'm excited to get started.
Yeah, and a disclaimer, just ignore any background noises because it's a live audience today, so you won't be that silent.
Or the passing of the mic.
True.
Okay.
That too. So our very first segment, obviously, we'll be talking about the importance of discussing sex consent in our African communities, right? So one of some few keynotes that we discussed or I realized is where we try to talk about sex consent so as to breaking myths around sex, especially in our African communities. There are certain things they tell us when we're growing up about sex that when you're an adult, you kind of realize that it was false or they exaggerated or misrepresented.
Oh, you know the thing where if you hold a guy's hand, you get pregnant?
Oh, yeah. Or if he gives you things to eat or he gives you gifts, you're going to pay for those gifts one way or the other.
That's true.
Yeah. One of them, and then we're talking about sex also helps in handling shame and embarrassment around sex. So that's why it's important to have these conversations. It promotes respect in relationships. You know, when you talk about what you expect or how you feel in your sexual relationships, or even if they're not, it's necessary to have those healthy conversations. It also helps in preventing sexual crimes, promoting a culture of communication and report. And it also helps in updating law structure. So the laws of your country or our regions, wherever we come from, the more we talk about sex, how we feel about them, and how they affect us or affect people around us, the better the laws are. People revise those laws and they protect all of us, both men and women. So we also look at cultural and social factors, right?
Yeah.
That influence consent. So do you have something to say about that?
On the whole issue of sexual consent, I feel like respecting our elders, what we're allowed to say slash not say, what you should know, but you know, and can't say you know, is a huge deal. You're not allowed to ask a question because how do you even know it's a question?
When our elders are speaking, you can't say anything. You're supposed to listen.
And not say anything. Whatever the spiritual leaders tell you is said. You're not allowed to argue. You're not allowed to comment about it because it's just the way it is. And then on the
Lack of
and then there's also lack of sex education. It's not taught till I think when you're 16 or 15.
really, is it?
I
though?
mean, now I feel like it's earlier, but before they would save it for like maybe from 3, so you were average.
Was it really sex education?
I mean,
Oh, you mean reproduction?
it was more reproduction, but that's as close as you got.
Because I know, like, I mean, older boys and girls, or especially for guys, for men, um, you're talking about, let's say, female reproduction or basic things about female anatomy, let's say periods, menstruation, and stuff. And you have boys who have no clue how that works or how that happens, the happenings around it. They have no idea, right? But these are guys that are supposed to get married someday and they will intend have female children, and they have no idea how certain things when it comes to female anatomy or sex as well
It works.
affects women.
Yeah.
The same thing for women, right? They don't know. They don't know either. So I think it goes both ways. I don't really think there is enough sexual education.
But then there's also the lack of proper investigation of sexual crimes.
Oh,
So you
that's a big
get
one.
so you get past the shame, and then you get to the point where you report it, but they don't actually investigate it. So what's the point in reporting it if no one's paying attention to detail?
They don't even believe you.
Exactly.
Most times, when often, especially, I think, especially for men, if a
Yeah.
man is like, oh,
And there's no clarification of sexual laws. I don't remember being taught like the law of consent or what's right or what's wrong. It's almost like you just expect it. But now
actually, for me, I didn't even hear the word consent till like way,
in the USA,
way into my teenage years before I heard the word consent. That's when I'd already traveled out of there. So they weren't really talking about consent, to be honest with you.
no.
So I can see our audience is like,
Writing.
yeah,
But
looking left and right.
we're
Yeah.
getting to the first interlude, and
Hi guys,
Lyris has something to
this is
say.
Lyris. Back to the conversation about like what they tell you about sex. It wasn't a conversation. It was don't have sex. Like there's nothing after that conversation. That was it. Don't have
True.
sex.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's almost like what I said. You're not allowed to ask a question because if you go
Because you
based
should
off
not
don't have
be
sex,
having sex. So there's really not much of a conversation or banter back and forth about what is sex or when should you be having sex or anything of the sort. You should not be having it. So if you're having it, you're doing something wrong. So you better hide it. The only way you get, I guess, in the sense, caught is when you're pregnant. That's when you're like, oh, she's having sex. But let's be real. A lot of
Oh,
people
he
were
is having sex when
Exactly.
when the guy becomes a dad.
Yeah.
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 Anyone else got anything to say?
So, like, why do you guys think that they say don't have sex? Like, why do you guys think that, like, like, what's the reason behind people saying don't have sex?
Go ahead.
I mean, you can look at it from 2 points, right? There's the part where our culture values virginity, right? Like we covered in another episode. They value virginity, and if you're having sex, you're not a virgin. If you're having sex, your value is less. If you're having sex, your bride price is less. If you're having sex, you're an embarrassment to your family.
if you're having sex, you're not wife material. I don't know what that means.
Like,
Or you're a bad child.
but true.
Winnie, you got something else, boo?
Well, just to add on what you just said, so what you ask her there, like, why is it like you can't have sex? Because, like she said, if you have sex, the bride price, like when they do the dowry, it goes down. So if you're not a virgin and that hymen is broken, that's another topic that they had on African people. If that hymen is broken, your bride price goes down. So that's why I guess it was a taboo to talk about sex.
It's almost like you're less value to your family or you're an embarrassment. It's almost like because the first daughter of the family got pregnant, the third daughter of the family is suffering years later because the first one got pregnant.
True. Now, I just want to flip it a little bit. You realize that when we're talking about that, it's more about the female perspective, right? So for guys, why shouldn't guys have sex before marriage? Like when we are talking about it, it's more or less like, oh, women shouldn't because their value goes down. Women shouldn't because of the dowry. Women shouldn't. Like it's coming from that perspective, right? So for guys, we have there are a couple of you here. Why do you think, like, as an African man, right? Why do you think that having sex, premarital sex, culturally, because we're speaking about Africa, of course, is frowned upon by your elders?
I mean, I don't know about by the elders, but I feel like semen retention is like really big for, like, say you have goals, you have plans, like, having sex sometimes you can deviate from your goals, like you can be distracted, but
Yeah.
semen retention is big for guys, like, like you're able to accomplish a lot when you can control yourself and yeah, like control yourself. So I feel like semen retention is big. So when you do have sex, sometimes like it's easy to just like not stay focused, because we know women, like once you get into a woman, the bills, I want to do this, I want to do that, bro. It takes a lot. You can't even save money, like, so yeah,
So women cost money.
money. Women love money.
Mike, what do you think?
Why do you think you
Like,
shouldn't
when
have
were growing
sex?
up, why shouldn't you
Have sex before
Or do
marriage?
you think you should? Was that a,
No,
How was
I think growing up, I would say it was frowned upon because uh, most of the time you will have young people having with kids which they can raise. So
true?
that's one thing which our parents were kind of like refusing us to, like, say, have sex or think sex was bad.
Right.
I would say that. So having kids without being married, and also having kids when you can afford to pretty much bring up those kids or sponsor those kids. So now having a kid, you pretty much will be putting a burden on your family.
That's true.
So that's one
That's a
reason
good
I
one.
would say.
Yeah, that's a good one. All right. All right, Daniel.
Along the lines of what Mike was saying, the whole, from a cultural perspective, besides the era of Christianity with its own reasons why we should not have sex or not, it's dealing with the consequences
Right.
of sex as a child, which, speaking to what Mike said, I mean, children, abortions, the financial responsibilities that come with it, the stigma, the loss in some cases, would be among the reasons why we shouldn't have sex as children until get to that state where as adults we can own our responsibilities. So
That's true.
That's my thought.
All right.
adulting is hard, and it's hard to do adulting when you're 13 or 14. So basically, on the other side, beyond being the bride price or whatever, our parents were actually watching out for us. They were making sure our path was set to success. They were making sure we were ready to be family men and women. We were ready to be mothers and fathers. Our parents were actually trying to set us straight. Now, did the myths, they might have been harsh, they might have been strong, but they were all guiding us towards the path of success, right?
Right. Right. I completely agree. Like when you're looking at sex and whatever it is, it's not really more. It's not really a male or female thing. It's in general. I think like consequences are things that affect both genders. It's not just affecting one gender, right? As we're realizing from our exchange, having premarital sex is something that everybody needs to think about the consequence, not just the men. Even if the consequences are different for us due to our gender, right? If it's financial wise, like Kader said, or it's just bringing shame on your family or whatever, we need to keep that in mind. Elmi has something to say.
I think too that also because like the for us going to school is like a big thing. Like you need to go at least to a certain level, and if especially talking about, why it was valued to women too, is also because, like, if a lady gets pregnant, then she has to drop out of school. And for like Africans, school is a big thing. Like, dropping out of school, you're already like a bad child. So you have to take 9 months, um, you know, to put to birth. You can't go to school right after. Now you're responsible for somebody else, which means that the goals that you had, whether they were planning that you should be like a doctor or something like that, now you've deviated from that because you're now responsible for somebody else. And then that puts you aside, and, you don't even, you don't know enough to actually, raise somebody and tell them, because you haven't even gone through like a lot of experiences too.
So I come from like a different culture, So our culture, they kind of like go with like practicing early marriage, They really encourage like early marriage, I've like grown up like my cousin and my family getting married at like 18, 19. So to prevent, sexual and everything. So they get married and then their parents will kind of like help them, provide them until they're like fully,
So does that apply for both genders?
Yeah. Yeah, they really. Nah, no, because the thing is like every time I go back home, like they really encourage, like they'll be like, oh, so you're past that age, when are you gonna get married? It's always that pressure, like every single day, even every single time I talk to my mom, always like when.
Yeah, but let's not forget that the kind of parents we have are the type who will not freely have sexual conversations with their children.
And that's why we're having this conversation to foster that conversation.
But I also think that the part of the reason, if I'm going to defend the parents in a way, is like, if I tell you about something at a point where I feel like you don't necessarily need to be doing it, because if you think about the way our African parents raise, they used to raise us, it's like when you've gone to school and you've graduated, because they always told you the same thing, right? Right now, concentrate on your education and stuff. Once you go to school and you graduate, then you can do whatever thing you want to do.
You are listening to African Teapot Podcast, and this episode is sponsored by Carlo James and Sandrine Mefford.
Okay, guys, coming from that part where we got to hear y'all's voices and what y'all have to think, let's cover the definition of consent. Consent is an agreement between participants to engage in sexual activity. Consent should be clearly and freely communicated. Consent could either be verbal or an affirmative expression of consent. So if you're going to go with something that's not verbal, you need to be pretty sure. If you're going with you're going with a head nod, you're going with an arm twist, we need you to make sure.
She danced and grind on me.
Yeah, like you need to make sure he grabbed my arm, she turned around for me. You need to make sure, 100% sure that was consent.
That guy asked for my number. Doesn't mean he wants to have sex with you.
That's how it happens. So we're going to throw out 2 examples, and y'all let us know if you think consent happens in both cases. There's the case of the Bayankole people, where the groom who is to marry the bride is going to sleep with an aunt. And then the aunt, what her duty is she's testing for this man's potency, this man's virility. She's testing out what this groom to be, what his taste is, what he likes. Then she educates the bride on what the groom wants. And then on the other example, Edna has the one where a guy is going to go, they stand in line, and then they have to all urinate.
Have their penises examined and the strength of their urine. So it's like if you pee and you know when a guy pees and it's like there's that curve in the pee, then it's like you've been doing stuff. I mean you are fine. Sorry, you're fine. If you pee like that, you're fine. If your pee is acting like there are some obstructions to it, it means you've been naughty.
Yeah. So again, we're keeping within the bounds of sexual consent.
And if the shaft, just to add to this, your shaft has that vein in it, the vein on the penis. and then you've been doing naughty stuff. It doesn't have you're a baby. You don't know anything.
So you've been having sex / you've not been having sex. So
Exactly.
keeping within the bounds of consent, do you think in one or both instances consent was given? And do you agree on the definition of sexual consent?
Yeah, I think consent was given based on the fact that they agreed to do it. And when you bring culture into it, it makes it a little different. But for me, if you're doing something and you're happy about it, that's consent. You're giving consent.
Okay.
I mean, I would say going on the definition of consent, it does fall within the realms, but I would say when we go to cultural aspects where you were almost like you have to do it to some level, like deep down, they would want to say no, but they can't say no. So technically they give consent, but I would say it's like a forceful consent.
So then you're getting into the next part, which we're talking about enthusiastic consent. And
Right.
I think Edna covers enthusiastic consent better than I do.
You know, if someone freely, willingly, and with no regret tells you that they are okay or gives you, instances that they are fine with whatever sexual act, right, guys? It's not just penetration. What sexual act you're asking them to do, then that is consensual by law. Okay? By law. There are so many things that happen within culture that by law you're breaking the law. But culturally, you understand, in your society they kind of do it. But it doesn't mean that by law what you're doing is okay. So that doesn't stand.
And I'm going to add one thing before Elmi talks, which we should have added to the definition of sexual consent. Sexual activity is not just the penetration, it's not just the penis, it's not just the vagina. It's touching someone's penis, it's touching a breast, touching someone inappropriately, something that makes someone feel violated. So it could be giving head, it could be a hand job, it could be whatever it is. But let's all understand that that is all sex and it's all covered under sexual consent. Did I cover what you were going to say?
Yes,
No, so what did you have to say?
No, simply you have to say.
No. All I was going to say was like anything that if you have multiple options to a thing and you choose one, then that would really, in terms of the definition of it, then that would be consent. So going back to the example you guys gave, because they don't have an option and because you're part of this village, for example, you have to do this. I don't really think that we can use that example as consent because there's no other way to do it but the way that the tradition has said you have to do it.
Okay.
Right. I do agree with that. That's what I believe, right? The moment options are taken away from you, you can't tell me that's enthusiastic consent. The moment you don't have options, but just the option I've given you, then you can't tell me that I'm consenting, willingly and willfully. Like students and teachers, I'm not going to give you a pass grade if you don't have sex with me. You really don't have an option. The option is either you pass the class or you fail the class, right? So within me, you are not testing my knowledge. You're just telling me I should have sex with you and pass the class, or whatever else,
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, what about if the girl says yes today and then tomorrow she tells you that she didn't say yes?
Okay, now we're getting to the point of lies telling. I mean, a liar is a liar, even it's about sex. Now, do we support people who say yes today and because you broke up with them tomorrow, they say they didn't give consent? Consent? Now, am I saying now you come to the part where if someone was under the influence of drugs, under the influence of alcohol, and at the point you guys were going with the affirmative consent where you're just looking at a head nod because she lets you keep going, then was it sexual consent?
I don't have a point, but I also have a question just on what Elmi said.
Right.
So like that auntie that is sleeping with everybody, what if she says she doesn't like it, but she's just trying, she just wants to do it?
For the sake of culture.
For the sake of happiness, culture.
Quite frankly, we will not know the answer to that question because we are not that answer.
Daniel, thank you. Thank you, guys.
And just to add to what they say, just because you regret having sex with somebody doesn't mean that you did not consent when it happened.
Yeah.
Because sometimes people report things because they just regretted that they had sex with that person.
Yeah, but what does the law say?
about that. Like the laws, when she regrets and then she go back and say, "Oh, I didn't do it. He raped me." The law will blame who? They won't even trying to.
I mean, unfortunately, Mr. Kader, the law cannot tell that in her heart she's lying. Yeah. So they go with proof. And if she's able to prove that there was no consent, is the problem.
I would say, I think this is where it goes now to the relationship with the person you are having sex with. Because a certain people you're having sex with, you know for a fact there's not going to be a question of was this consent or not. When you meet a girl for the first time, I would tell you to get verbal consent. Right?
Okay, guys. So moving over to the next segment, which Edna is going to be introducing.
I think we'll be talking about consent and its challenges, right? We've already kind of dipped our toes into that part, actually, talking about consent and the challenges of consent. Kader said one of the issues with consent is someone lying, just waking up and saying, well, you know, he or she, you know, he raped me and whatever. When you look at science and biologically, if a woman is forcefully, you penetrate somebody, male and female, if you penetrate somebody forcefully, the evidence is going to be there biologically, right, Lynn?
That is true.
It's going to be there. Now, when it comes to anytime you consider or feel somebody is impaired or somebody is not in their rightful mind, I would say all of us sitting in this room and to those listening, do not proceed with sexual activity with that person. The person is lit, the person is drunk, the person is, this person was, disoriented, you understand, they were too sad, they were depressed. The person is a minor, it doesn't matter how they look like, both for men and women. Please, do not proceed with any sexual favors. And we mean sexual favors because sometimes when they talk of sexual consent, everyone thinks only of penetration. No. You tell a woman, hey, take out your boobies, and I'm going to give you $10. And she's like, no. Don't come and say, well, I didn't rape her. No. Sexual harassment is there, you understand? So it's not just penetration. And if you stick your fingers in someone's anus, in someone's vagina, that is rape. Some people think rape means only your penis has to be inserted in somebody. If you use a toy and insert it in someone's vagina or somebody's mouth.
And it does not only have to be sex toy. Bottle.
Yes, a bottle, carrots, whatever it is. You insert it into somebody. No, guys, honestly, the law. You insert it into somebody's mouth, anus or vagina, and you have any sexual arousal or anything from it. That is sexual harassment, and that not just sexual harassment and rape. Please, when we come to the white man's land, sometimes we mix culture with what the law says.
The law will never be on your side. That's number one. But there is apps, right? I feel like I don't know if you guys have seen it. There's apps where y'all both can sign consent. Yeah, go on your Google, your app store, and they type consent, sex function. You'll find it. There's apps. But but how do you guys feel about recording? If you don't trust a woman or like your partner, for example, like what if you record the conversation? What if you record the conversation? I mean, or the thing so that it can back you up in the front of law for whatever reason.
I would say don't be having sex with her if you don't trust her. But I guess if it's that bad, at least get consent.
Okay, so this is what I'm gonna say. There's this thing called Me Too movement. I think everybody understands Me Too movement. So if, let's say, you want to get kinky, one night stand, I'll just say, pull your phone out, have it on recording. I know it's going to be unethical, but guess what? It is you that's going to go to jail. So if you have to record it or have it in writing, do what you got to do.
But you got to understand, though, but when it's time to, you really want to get something, you know what I'm saying? You don't have that mentality of, you don't have that mentality. You don't have that time to think, But the thing is that you're not gonna be like, oh, stop. You're not gonna be like, oh, stop. Oh, let's send some papers,
Okay, call your homeboys. Call one of your homeboys and say, hey, she gave me consent.
Guys, we need to understand that's why we're covering sexual consent. That's the problem. You think about control. You're trying to think before you get into trouble. But you're trying to think before people do not rape people because they wake up one morning and they're like, hey, you know what? I'm going to go rape Sandra across the street. You wake up one day, and because you're not thinking straight, and because you are driven again by just sex at the time, you commit an act which you're not thinking at the time is rape. And guess what? Tomorrow you're a rapist.
And then you will have enough time to think about it in jail.
In jail, you know what I'm saying?
You will think about it in jail.
Bro,
I only do it one time.
but the thing is that, no, you all gotta understand. The thing is like everybody, like most of the time, like, you know, you go out and all that, you don't plan to have sex, you know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
You don't plan to have sex.
Exactly.
It just happens, you know. You're just like, oh, you know, it just starts with, like, you know, making out and all that. It's just like, you know, it's a process, you know. You just never have time to kind of like prepare yourself.
Okay, following what my boy said, I know most of the time we go out, we're not planning on having sex, yes. But that doesn't mean that you don't have to also like control.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
And I'm just gonna add to what Maru said. Like I said, you have to have self-control. And like I said, if you wanna have sex with another woman, pick your women right. Cause
Exactly. Sexual responsibility.
But the thing is, like, we have all witnessed like amount of that. You're talking about Me Too movement, you know. We have seen so many victims that got false, like, you know, accusation because of, like, you know, the Me Too movement, you know. I feel like sometimes also you also gotta give the benefit of the doubt to like both parties, you know. You know, just now, yeah, you cannot just say, oh, this and that, and just you go with it, you know. I feel like it comes with, like, you know, understanding both parties, you know.
I want to be the devil's advocate here a little bit. How do you talk about control when you're intoxicated if you must have control?
Exactly. Again, all of it is control. Because you raped someone when you were drunk. Let me remind y'all, because you did something when you were drunk does not excuse your behavior. That person is suffering the effects of what you did when you were intoxicated. You don't commit murder and say, well, you're dead, but I was drunk when I did it, and that's okay, they're still dead. So guys, the whole point is what y'all is saying. We're not thinking about it that way, but lives are affected by our actions. And that is why you need to think of sexual consent.
Yes, and the judge will decide your fate. In jail, you have time to think about it in jail.
Yes, guys.
Don't do it.
I think that more of what we are trying to say is just that the law should also have something in there that protects the people who just decide to just falsely accuse people of doing something.
Yeah.
Because right now it's pro the women, so the woman has the power to piss today. If she wakes up tomorrow and says, "Hey, give me,"
and people believe,
right.
People go for that, you know.
All right, let's dial this back. We are speaking from the African perspective. We are speaking about us as Africans within our communities, both home and abroad, right? So when you come abroad, when you're here in the United States, you're talking about the Me Too movement. You need to understand that I am not saying there should be zero accountability for actions. Someone who is caught lying, I personally believe that if you are caught falsifying, rape, or any other crime, that should be a crime in itself.
Course, yeah.
But now when we take it to our counterparts on the other side of the sea, they don't have Me Too.
Yeah.
You understand? And there is something I also want to clarify. There is this belief that men cannot be sexually assaulted or raped. That is very possible.
And there's one reaction in the room.
Yeah. That happens way more often than you think.
Yeah, I think an example I saw, it was the show Love is Blind, where he couldn't even use the word rape, but he was raped.
He was.
And the entire time, he just kept saying, I said no multiple times, saying she just could not use the word, because a lot of men believe that they can't be raped, but you can.
Because I have something to add to this. Because we smile across the room and it's like, men cannot be raped. Bear with me, parents, we are living in a society where parents rape kids. Aunties rape kids. Men rape men. We are living. We see it all the time, where older men are raping young boys, taking advantage of 10-year-old boys, 13-year-old boys. When you have your child, we are living in a society where you have to protect your kids at all ages and all genders. Do not think that men cannot be raped and you have your kid out here who is a boy and is being molested by a neighbor or an uncle or a pastor in church. These things happen. Are you guys on social media?
I mean,
What?
So I think,
Being silly.
like, I feel like it's more of a matter of like the pride, right? I'm not saying it's justified. I'm not justifying that pride that we have as a man, but it's like some men don't have the guts to go and say, "I was raped." How? By who?
And that's what we are talking about, the stigma. We're talking about the shame.
Yeah, like you think like how do you say you're a man, especially in the African terms, if you were raped? How do you even come out to say you were raped? And most of the time, most men that are actually raped are by family members.
Guys, think of your first time. Think of your first time. If you were 11 and your first time was one of your ugly aunties took advantage of you, when you think about that, you're not smiling. You're not thinking about it and you're smiling.
Or one of your uncles.
I have never.
One of your uncles came and was rubbing your penis or something. That is not funny because when you think about it now, you're not smiling about it. So that person raped you, that person molested you, and they took advantage of you. But when people ask you what's your first time, because you lie and embellish your first time, you think it was not traumatic when it happened to you. And because you don't accept that, how will you educate your own kids? How will you protect your own male and female children? We live in a society where people have sex with animals. So if you have a human being in your house, protect them.
Chicken.
Protect them.
Seriously, have you guys not seen it? Okay. Well, no, I have like an example, right?
Yeah.
There's this guy that I knew, like he went to like a college party. There was this girl that was always into him, or like he always refused her sexual advances. Thank you. And then there was a night where they both got drunk, and she took advantage of him. And then there was people there like in the room. She was on him and everything. But after when I guess she sobered up or whatever, she went to campus security and said she was raped.
Yeah.
But then the only good thing was that there was other people who witnessed everything. Automatically, like people assumed that yes, he did it, and they wanted to put him in jail. But then when they started doing like investigation and everything, they realized that like no, the person that was actually raped here was the dude. And then they asked like, do you guys want to press charges and everything? He's like, nah, I'm okay, like she's fine. But just to say that like, thank God there was a witness, involved in this. Because if there wasn't, he would have gone in jail. And then, he would have just gone on.
This episode is in collaboration with Kitchen Creations. Kitchen Creations is African cuisine promoting the belief of your only limit is your imagination. Check her out on Instagram and mention Teapot3 for 10% off your first order. And guys, let me tell you, the food is fooding.
Also, this is something I wanted to say is, I think the law frowns on men more, when it comes to consent, I feel like we the men suffer on that a lot.
But again,
something which I think maybe there's more research and more investigation that needs to be done when an allegation is brought forward.
True, that's true. I do concur, actually, because I think like a lot of females also walk around being irresponsible, right? And then when they wake up again, it goes back, and they regret it. Then it becomes the fault of the man, right? Because it's just the way it is. So the only way I would say, before the law ever comes around to come and say, hey, they're going to protect you in that way you guys want to be represented by law, what you have is yourself and each other. I know that if you are self-responsible and you hold yourself accountable to things you do, you avoid a lot. You will not necessarily have yourself just waiting for law to protect you most of the time. Like the apps they talked about, it sounds funny, but I think an app is way better than trying to fight a false allegation.
Because think about it, the app wouldn't be made if it was not a solution to a problem.
Somebody thought about it. Maybe a guy like you guys thought about it and was like, no, So what Mike said is true, but before that law ever comes, in place, you need to use these other things and tools that are there for you guys. And they need to be accountable. Because sometimes you see your friend going somewhere and, the girl is drunk or something. Call your friend out. Like, hey, Mohammed, today this girl doesn't look like, she looks like this, so let's go home.
Yeah,
because sometimes you guys just take sex to be, like you take it lightly. Yeah. So you see your friend going into trouble and you don't even try to call him out on it. You don't try to protect them. But I think those are things that you guys need to have in place until the law comes to protect you guys like that.
And you guys use what I feel like women fought a lot for. Let me finish. I feel like women fought a lot
And
to
you're
get
proud.
like really like recognized in terms of like this happened. Because men don't want to talk about it, don't want to say they were raped. You guys are never going to get the recognition that you deserve if you're not taking advantage of it. How many men actually go and say they're raped? How many women would actually go ahead and do it? It also comes to the fact that you guys need to take the step to get the result you want.
Just to add on what Lyric said, or what Edna also said, like I believe for men, because I know women is always we are Me Too movement, like this feminism. I don't want to go there, but I feel like gender roles and power dynamics. I feel like men don't have voices. So to me, I'm your brother's keeper. If I see Elmis going on and I see Marius is drunk and Elmi is drunk, I'll be like, hey, dude, pause. That female right there, she don't look right. Step away.
You guys need to do that a little bit.
Yeah, like you guys need to be your brother's keeper. That's all I want to say.
Okay. And then to add to this topic, to go to the next segment, guys, the next thing, we can be here for 3 hours,
Yeah.
is we need to look at consent within long-term established relationships, marriages, arranged marriages, right? Because some people believe because he's my husband, she's my wife, I can't rape her. I can't, she can't take advantage of him or something.
Before we move on, guys, what if we start a We Too movement?
Oh my god.
We too. What's that? What that?
Men, because women have Me Too, men should have Me Too.
We Too.
Okay.
We
Yeah.
stand for that, right?
I think that's equal rights. I'm for equal
Yeah.
rights.
Society.
Anything that is fighting for you to be properly represented, I'm all for it.
Take away the stigma and everything.
Yeah.
Not to minimize that fact, because We Too, here we go, We Too.
Yeah.
Let's also talk about consent in marriages, arranged marriages, and long-term relationships. Because you had sex with your wife on Monday, on Tuesday, on Wednesday, doesn't mean she wants it on Thursday. Do you guys think there needs to be continued consent, or it's a duty or responsibility where consent is just automatically assumed? Daniel has got some
before
words.
Daniel gets into the conversation, I think that when you're so familiar with someone, you don't need a 5-minute conversation to say no. You just be like, not today, no, or only like no verbal cues of her turning away. Like I feel like a lot of people think like it has to be like this big thing where like, like a big no is said. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And sometimes just say, I'm not in the mood. Or sometimes you guys have code words, right? You say this, it means I'm not for it.
And I would say with marriage, there are gray areas in marriage. With regards to and quite honestly, there are gray areas in marriage where if that communication is not done, because with marriage we've been talking about knowing your partner knowing your wife or your husband for a long time, so there's times when you know that okay, they're in a mood for it, at times when, I mean, you get what I'm saying. But then you also have those verbal cues and you have those non-verbal cues in marriage, where one person is on heat, the other person is not feeling it.
On heat, I like that statement.
Someone is horny.
When somebody is on heat, thank you, Daniel. Continue.
Yeah, when someone is on heat and the other person isn't. And yes, you can rape your husband, you can rape
Thank you.
your wife
Thank you.
in marriage, even though there are certain texts biblically that would state that the man's body is that for the wife and she should not be selfish with it, and the woman's body is that of the man and she should not be selfish with it. It doesn't mean nonetheless, but that's why I said that there are gray areas.
Exactly.
In
So
marriage.
again, we come to how religion and culture is something that's constantly influencing sexual consent. Could you think about 60 years ago, one of your grand aunts is saying, I did not consent for my husband to sleep with me? How? Who would you report it to?
Yeah,
Who would
like
listen to you?
sometimes
The
think of those families where they are like 15. A woman gave birth like 13 kids and stuff. When you go there, do you think she would? Most of them would tell you like, nah. They didn't want all those kids. I know back then birth control wasn't a thing. They didn't want all those kids. Half of the time, They had these kids from a drunken night. So please,
Thank you. Please.
don't take advantage of your wives and don't take advantage of your husbands, because it happens. Rape is not only that she's also not in the mood. Let's say you're a husband, you want to try anal, and your wife doesn't want to. Just because she's refusing her body, or you want her to give you you want your husband to give you head, and he's like, no, I have sex, but I don't believe in giving head. If you force him or you force her, my dear people, that's rape.
Guess what? So for culturally, going back to what Edna says, you know, our grandparents, we make fun of these pajamas. Right now we have like the fancy pajamas. You know, our grandparents had like 10 kids, 15 kids, but there's a day like, for instance, she would make a meal and it's a cube, like Lemon say. Make a sumptuous meal. I know like tonight I'm gonna get it, because guess what? She's on heat.
So going with meals, right? People, think about it. So you know how economically things are challenging sometimes. What if the man just, the paycheck didn't meet his means? What if, you know, he had to pay the house, X, Y, and Z, but like, for some reason he couldn't give the money to eat for tomorrow or for thing? What if she refused to give, you know, like, what if she refused to have sex because you couldn't give the money for food?
Because again, there was no sexual consent.
Yes.
She has not consented to the sex. It does not matter why. If it's because she's upset, because she's angry, because you did not give her money. The thing is, she still did not want the sex. That is sexual consent. It's sexual consent has to be an agreement between two people. One person is clearly saying no,
And the person has to willfully. Guys, I hope we've understood that. Not you saying, well, if you don't have sex with me, if you don't give me, and I'm going to report you in front of the Muadas, like we see in the Nigerian movies.
on enthusiastic consent.
Yes, you don't threaten somebody, or kind of, you know what I mean, low key threaten someone, and then when they do something, you say, well, I didn't force them. Yes, you did. And if you take options away from somebody on the table, you are forcing that person. So that is not consensual.
So guys, you know, sometimes they say when women want something, they have it. You know, like when they're horny, they want to have sex, they have it. But what about guys from our perspective? We're thinking of it as the women perspective. What about it for guys?
Again,
we don't want to give the time because we're tired.
So the thing is, like, all of you guys are talking about the problem. So what is the solution? You know, you all keep talking about.
We're getting there.
What is the solution to all these problems?
I think that we're diverting a little bit because the definition of consent at the beginning of this topic. Consent is either a yes, a willful yes, not a forced yes, or a binary
Kind of yes.
It's a yes. I want to say no, it's a no.
And it can be verbal or non-verbal.
So,
Yes.
Yeah.
What if you say no to the second round? What if you just want to do one round?
Then
she
consented to one. Yes, one round. End of story, period.
She only, guys, you guys are making me laugh. But she only, if she consents to half the round, guys, if she consents to half the round, she's consented to half. If she consented only to stroking her ass, if she says stop, don't
if a woman
say
says stop,
it's stop.
no.
Then
No, but the thing is,
stop,
like,
you stop.
Why having sex? No, I'm sorry. Like you guys. Let's say you guys are having sex, right? Let's say you guys are having sex. You know what I'm saying? And I've still not got to that point. You know, you cannot just say stop. You know what I'm saying? I gotta finish it, right?
Guys, Edna and I are going to go over the definition again. Yes. A definition is a consent between two people.
Yeah.
The guy says yes, the girl says yes, or the two guys say yes, or the two girls say yes, or the four people say yes. Doesn't matter. Every
Adults.
And again, guys, let us mention 18 plus.
Even though we know in Africa we have some cultures where they get, their cultures accept younger marriages. That's okay. That's topic for another day. But we are strictly within the guidelines of 18 plus. And we also need to understand that power dynamics is a big thing. So the moment you have power in a set conversation, whether two people, the moment you have more power and you use the power on to the other person, consent is out the window. You need to understand that. I am your boss. I'm the principal. I'm your dad, I'm this. The moment you are letting that person know, like, hey, I have the power in this conversation, it means you're saying what they're saying doesn't matter.
Okay,
so
Marius.
right there is consent is out of the
Marius has
not consensual.
Sorry, Marius has got a couple words for us.
I think I have a solution for the guys. If you ever worry about whether consent is given or not, imagine yourself as a girl and a man, you following you.
Exactly.
Yes or no?
Exactly.
Exactly, guys. Marius, thank
That's
you.
my solution.
What is it?
And so let's go to the part where we're concluding this. We're wrapping this up. What is the whole point of why we decided to have this conversation, and we decided that sexual consent is something that's important and we need to cover? We're trying to make sure that there's open dialogue. Most of these issues, or why we're asking questions that some people might be saying it's an obvious answer, or they grew up listening to, is because it was not an open conversation for us. It was not an open dialogue. There is not an avenue. There is not places where we go to figure out all this information. Would you say, Edna?
Yes. We definitely are limited by, especially within our African communities, we are limited by information, flow of information. Nobody tells us. If you don't go to Google consent, if you don't go to Google rape to understand what rape is and what penetration, all of that, legal jargons, we don't know. Nobody tells us. So sometimes we are only figuring it out when we are already on the wrong side of the law. That's when you're figuring out, like, oh, it's that bad,
Yeah.
But
we need to make sure there's sexual responsibility where there's alcohol, where there's drugs. We need to make sure we're paying attention
to things like
whether
that.
it's the verbal, it's the non-verbal cues. Like, we watch out for our friends, we watch out for our loved ones, we watch out for our
download
families.
the consent app.
I don't care how
That's
you
a
do
good
it,
one.
but the whole goal is making sure we're all safe.
You ask. It's better for you to ask someone, are we good? Are you okay? Do you want to proceed with this? It's better to ask that person 10 times than trying to hire a lawyer 10 times after.
Because jail time is real, y'all. Like we need to make sure that's something we're paying attention to. And then
and a little thing I wanted to add, which came to my attention when I mentioned this on social media when we were doing this, where someone said, if someone is being raped or molested, sexually assaulted, let's say we go to a room, I see my friend fondling, somebody's breast, I think like, okay, it's not right. This girl is passed out or something, you shouldn't. It's like, well, I didn't fondle her breast, or I didn't partake in raping her, so I'm innocent. No, you're an accessory. If other people penetrated her and what you did was that you looked at her breast and you were laughing, you will be facing sexual harassment crimes while the others are facing rape because they penetrated.
If you held the camera,
and recorded,
you assisted in going to the store to buy that condom.
So if you're in a room and your friend is acting a little crazy and you're saying, hey, let's get out of here, what you're doing he's not, get out of there. At least at that point you'll be arguing you left, because you are supposed to report it. That's an ongoing crime. You are supposed to report it.
And it would be nice if you called for help.
Yeah.
Or you be the help.
But don't stand there and be like, well, they took the girl to the room. I was in the living room, so I didn't see it. No.
They always say, see something, say something.
Exactly. So we also fostering open dialogues about consent, reducing stigma around reporting. We've known that, especially for the men. We Too movement. Oh yeah, you guys need to work on that. You guys need to hold women more accountable to the things that they do to you guys. A girl played smart on your friend, a girl played smart on you, hold them accountable, start from there. That's the beginning. But if you just say, well, the power is on the other guys, just like how we women, if we just said, well, we didn't have voting rights, so the men vote and we just sat, then we will not have change. So if you don't say something about being taken advantage of, nobody's going to represent your cause.
Okay, guys, and we are finally at the end of our 3rd anniversary episode.
Yay! Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you to the friends. Thank you to family. Thank you to well-wishers and sponsors. And thank you to the person who made sure our bellies were filled while we went through this. Kitchen Creations, thank you. Follow her on Instagram. Check out her meals. She always got you. We have one more comment from Mr. Kadir, who wants to say something before we take the celebratory drink.
So everybody raise the cup, raise the shot glass. to consent, to money,
Guarded.
to chop life.
Guarded.
And see you until the next season.
Thank you. Like, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, listen to the podcast. We are on iHeartRadio. Thank you. This is Lini and your host Exy, and thank you for 3 amazing years.
Woo!
Ciao.
Thanks for listening, and make sure to join us for our next episode.
Follow African Teapot on both Instagram and Facebook for daily inspiration and motivation.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel, African Teapot Podcast.